there have been some legendary fights in the UFC. There have been those fights that if you could give a bonus better than fight of the night, if there could be a bonus that you could give on the spot for fight of the year, you would be giving these fights that award. And I'm going to be going through my top 5 personal best fights in UFC history. And I mean, and this is like in terms of like entertainment, in terms of skill, and honestly, just overall like heart, grit, determination, and just raw like power and skill shown in these bouts. And starting off with number 5. Oops. Right, I gotta keep clicking. Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker. One of the best fights. It's number 5 on this list because it started to slow towards the end compared to the rest of the list. A lot of these guys, were able to keep up the pace towards the end of the rounds. I mean, some of them slowed to the 4th or the 5th, but like after the second round, these guys slowed down a lot. But speaking of the second round, that second round was the most entertaining round in UFC history. And it's like John Anik said, one of the best rounds of all time, except if you like defense. Just off the walls violence. Fucking throwing hands. No deep. These guys weren't concerned about getting hit. They were concerned about hitting each other more. It was just an incredible back and forth fight. Poirier pulled like 3 guillotines. Who would have fucking guessed? But hey, man, you miss 100% of the guillotines you don't take or you don't jump. This fight was one of the ones that turned Hooker into a fan favorite because it showed just how much fun he can be. And like before that, he had another incredible fight with Paul Felder, but this fight is just what like up there in terms of violence. A little bit. It was a little bit sloppy at times, but you can't. I mean, when you're throwing as hard as they're throwing and you're giving it as much as they're giving, you can't even blame them. Number 4, I have Aldo versus Mendes too. Is it raining outside? Hold on, I think it's raining outside. Let me check my weather app. No, it's just very windy. Okay. Yeah, great fight. I don't know why I put this for this fight, but not like Poirier Hooker. Both had moments where they hurt each other bad and could have finished the fight. I mean, both ended up dropping each other. There was some controversy, but in a fun way, Aldo landed a late shot after the bell, I think in the first round, that like rocked Mendes bad, that had him like stumble into the fence. Could have possibly dropped him if landed earlier. Mendes landed a couple of low blows and eye poke, and I think in the moment a lot of people were like arguing that they thought Mendes won, or that they believed that Mendes should have gotten the fight or should have gotten the victory. I thought Aldo won pretty clearly, but apparently from what I've heard, a lot of people thought Mendes took the rematch when it came out, when the fight happened. But I don't know about now. Mendes showed good striking improvements, and Aldo displayed his amazing boxing and incredible takedown defense. Both put on an incredible pace, and they really only started to slow down towards like the middle and end of the 4th. That's when they really started to slow down. And I honestly think that like in terms of pace, probably one of the highest output fights in UFC history. I mean, these guys were throwing leather. Mendes was fishing for the takedown. Like, just an incredible back and forth fight. Incredible talent displayed from both. I think in this fight, Aldo showed he was clearly the better fighter, but Mendes showed he was a great fighter, and definitely had the potential to become a champion. Although he never became a champion, I think if he was there before Aldo, he would have become a champion. Number 3, we had to include this one. Rory McDonald versus Robbie Lawler. One of the most brutal and violent fights in UFC history. If you thought Poirier Hooker was violent, dude, this pisses on its grave. By the end of the second, both were left in a pool of each other's own blood. Again, there were both moments where the ref could have stopped the fight. There were moments where I thought Lawler was about to get finished. I was like, oh shit, Lawler's he's about to be done for. And at the end of I think it was the third or the fourth, they had one of the most intense end of round stare downs. They were just staring each other down. The pace never slowed down. And Robbie ended up getting the finish at the beginning of the fifth. Absolutely just legendary performance. And then there's this legendary moment right here where Robbie, with his split open lip that was starting, like stiffen up and come back together. You know how when you have a cut, like on a place where there's like a crease, like if you get like a cut on like a maybe like your knuckle or something, or like when like you leave your hand like relaxed, it'll start to come back together and like it'll start healing a little bit. But then when like you like make a fist, it'll tear it back open. Robbie Lawler did that with the cut on his lip. Just screamed and like ripped open the cut again. Like a fucking shad. One of the best fights of all time. Deserves to be on this list, and Hall of Fame performances. All of these fights are Hall of Fame performances, honestly. Like Aldo Mendes 2 should get Hall of Fame. This is gonna get Hall of Fame. And of course, the next one on this list is obviously going to get Hall of Fame as well. Yuri Prohaska versus Glover Teixeira. Awesome fight. Amazing high-paced fight on the feet and on the ground. And the pace was shocking for how old a guy like Glover was. I mean, the grappling transitions and the work each fighter did in each position was amazing. A guy like Glover was getting reversed by Yuri, who'd shown great striking, but in terms of his grappling, hadn't gone against the most amazing fighters, Volkan Ozdemir and Dominic Reyes. Can't really display much against those guys in terms of the grappling compared to a guy like Glover. But both fighters had their moments. It was an incredibly skillful fight. And Yuri had one of the best comebacks. While in the fifth round, tied on one scorecard, down 2 on the other scorecards, he was losing the fight. If he didn't finish Glover there, he would have lost by either split or unanimous decision. And he had one of the craziest comebacks with 30 seconds left in the round. 30 seconds left in the fifth round, becomes the first person to submit Glover Teixeira in his career. All around, just a crazy performance. Incredible fight. Honestly, both of these guys deserve Hall of Fame for it. And I just think that, man, if this fight doesn't go in the Hall of Fame, then fucking no other fight ever to happen in the future or the past deserves it. Except this one. I love Davison Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno 1. People might say I'm trying too hard, or I'm a fake hardcore because I hype up the flyweights a lot. I fucking love this fight. Absolute dogfight from both. This fight showed incredible skill on the ground and feet from both. It showed how entertaining the flyweight division can be. This is the fight that I think really made Brandon Moreno a star. Because they saw how entertaining this was, and they were like, oh, let's put this on a pay-per-view. Fans are going to go fucking crazy for Moreno. it showcased the true talent of the flyweight division. In my opinion, one of the most skillful matches in UFC history, chess match. It ended in a draw. It ended in a reasonable draw because I think Davison Figueiredo got a point deduction for tickling Brandon Moreno's balls too many times, and it set up one of the greatest rivalries in UFC history, making it the first quadrilogy in UFC history. Fucking awesome fights. And let's be clear, this fight was only a draw because Figueiredo got this point deduction. If it wasn't for that point deduction, Figueiredo would have gotten the nod because he won the round, he got the point deduction. So that's one of the only reasons. I think he would have won by split decision. I think. But he either would have won by split decision or unanimous decision. I can't really remember the scorecards off the top of my head. But I know if he didn't get that point deduction, he would have won that fight. But regardless, it set up one of the best rivalries in UFC history. Some of the most amazing fights. And honestly, these are where I think these 4 fights took like 90. They took like half of like the fighting spirit that Brandon Moreno had. Because in each one of these fights, okay, well, in the second and the third fight, Brandon Moreno is kind of just shitting on him. But in the first and the third fight, it took everything that Brandon Moreno had to stay in the fight. In the third fight, Brandon Moreno got dropped 3 times. In the first fight, Figgy was kind of piecing him up a bit. He was slipping the jabs, uppercuts. This fight took everything that Brandon Moreno had in terms of his fighting spirit. And honestly, probably worth it. Created some of the best fights of all time. Honestly, just an incredible showcase from both. I loved these fights. I loved this fight the most. My favorite fight of all time. And I think all of these fights are going down in UFC history. All of these fights are legendary fights. Love them all. But yeah, that was my list for the top 5 matches or top 5 fights in UFC history. Let me know down below. I love y'all baby ganjuses, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.